Welcome to the Big Bets on Campus podcast. I'm Mike Calabrese, and I'm joined by Collin Wilson and Duck. Today, we dive into the American. Our Pac-12, Sun Belt, Mountain West Conference, and MAC previews are already in the can, so check them out if you missed them, either on your podcast feed or over on the BBOC YouTube channel. And make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss a thing, because we have more previews rolling down the highway here as we get to college football season. I mean, it's quickly approaching, but you want to feel prepared. You got to listen through. Not only are we going to hit you with all of our G6 previews, but Collin and Stucky are going to walk you through the Power Four as well in the coming weeks. Where do we start with the American, boys? How about the fact that this team sent a program to the college football playoff last year, and you can make a compelling argument that Tulane's A game wasn't as strong as South Florida's or North Texas, or at least you can get into that argument. That shows just how deep and talented this conference can be. But as with any G6 league, the American is now a victim of their own success. Summerall off to Florida. Eric Morris, now the leading man at Oklahoma State. Alex Golish crosses the Gulf of America to go on and coach the Auburn Tigers there in the SEC. And now Ryan Silverfield gets to fix Arkansas, a job that has claimed the coaching lives of Sam Pittman, Chad Morris, and Brett Bielema in recent years. Let's hop in. Let's start with the Navy midshipmen, 11-2 last year, but bye-bye to Horvath and Heidenreich. Their win total is sitting at 7.5. They're plus 470 to win the conference. Always shop around, still some 5-1s out there. The defense has a lot back, 61% of returning production on that side of the ball, but the offense is building around Woodson and needs new playmakers to emerge. Drew Cronick's Millennial Wing T, by the way, it made Horvath a star. 2,500 rushing yards, 2,900 passing, 58 total touchdowns across the last two seasons. Really has made this offense from a true service academy triple into a pick your poison situation. Braxton Woodson needs to settle in a little bit here, but he's had some run, 19 appearances, 2 starts. He's shown flashes. You could argue that he's already kind of proven to be a poor man's Horvath, both on the ground and through the air. He's big, so he certainly can take the pounding at 6'3", 215. The line returns 3 starters and 2 others with experience, so reasons for optimism there. So much, though, is gone in terms of the playmakers, as I mentioned. Heidenreich, Teska, Chapman, they're all gone. The receiving core is pretty green as well. Vic Listorti is the next man up at fullback, but the buzz is heating up around Charles Robinson to fill that Heidenreich Swiss Army knife role. He's kind of a late bloomer, a former quarterback. He's going to step into that snipe role, hopefully hit some, rail passes out of the backfield as well. We'll see if he can actually fill those shoes, because Heidenreich is not a player that you often see at a service academy. 8 defenders return with 200-plus snaps from last year. Landon Robinson, the big loss in the middle. But you have to have faith in Newberry, because he almost always fields a competent defense. In SP Plus terms, every one of his defenses, either as a DC or a head coach here at the Naval Academy, have landed between 53rd and 75th. Mark Anthony Parker is a great all-level linebacker who can make plays both in the backfield, drop into pass coverage, someone to kind of build around. Let me go to you first here on this, Duck, though. Do you think the ceiling is a bit too high in terms of just the projections? Because when you look at it preseason, you can make an argument that Navy's going to be favored in, 11 games? Do you think that's a little bit much for a team that's replacing so many playmakers on offense?
I absolutely do. And the players lost, you don't find talent like that, like Horvath and Heidenreich and Chapman and Alex Teska. You don't naturally acquire those players through a regular Navy cadet churn. The portal, they don't get portal players in. They only see them leave. I think it is a little lofty to expect 9 wins here. So I do lean under the win total of 8.5. When you look at the offense and the wing tee, I think that there is an opportunity that this maybe looks a little bit more like when Newberry first took over a couple of seasons ago. I don't think that Navy is going to be equipped with the explosiveness that we saw them use last year and have where they could have this quick strike offense. I think that when you look at the quarterback situation, Woodson will be fine. He's had 5 100-yard games. He's played a plethora of snaps, and he's got an experienced offensive line around him that is going to at least allow for Navy to operate. I think it's going to be long, methodical drives. I'm not convinced that Michael Barrow, Vic Listorti, Quentin Ezard, or Luke Hutchinson are going to be those guys that are going to provide the explosiveness. And so it is going to be a grind for Navy on the offensive side. I really think it looks like what we saw when he got here, which was very little explosiveness, almost hard to watch at times, long time consuming drives. And Navy also does lose a decent amount of production along the defensive line. So I think that defensive line will be inviting for opponents to run the ball against Navy. The back seven should be shored up okay. There is talent both at linebacker and in the secondary. So I don't think they'll give up a lot of explosive plays, but I do think that Navy games are going to be grinder games. There's a lot of games that Navy is really going to have to struggle in. The conference schedule does grade out favorable. They're the second easiest conference schedule that I have per my metrics. So there is a certain floor that Navy has earned the right to benefit from. I mean, 6-6, 7-5 is probably the floor for this team, but I lean under 8.5, and you can find that at FanDuel at -152.
Collin, you're also targeting the under here. We're kind of splitting hairs a little bit. You can make the argument that the coaching staff gives them a pretty, stable floor in terms of what the season's going to look like when you mix and match it with the schedule. There's a lot of winnable games here. But for the service academies that we've discussed, whether it's Air Force, Army, or this Navy team, they're going to be in a lot of one-possession games. And that can make it kind of difficult from a modeling perspective to get a real good feel. But you are locking in the under here. Explain why.
That is a great question that I didn't know you were going to answer or ask, and I'm glad you're going to give me the chance to answer. This conference is about who has the defensive line to stop the run. There are a lot of teams that are going to be able to run the ball here with good running back and offensive line combinations. Navy is not one of those defensive lines that is going to be able. I mean, if you go back and think about Notre Dame throwing up 500 rushing yards, that's about what this defensive line is going to be for Navy this year. And look, Brian Newberry was extremely blunt at media days for the AAC media days. He said, those guys we lost, they're generational talents. It's impossible to replace Eli, Landon Robinson, and Blake Horvath. So when you have a coach saying generational talents and you can't replace that, if Braxton Woodson, this is his fourth year in the academy, like we've seen freshman quarterbacks plug and play in this Navy offense over the years, no matter what style they're running, and like they've taken off and been elite. That's not Braxton Woodson. He's had a fumble problem in the past. He has only had 9 explosive runs last year. There are things with this. The running back unit is not great. The wide receiver unit, I think the worst in the conference. But let's get back to the defensive line, because a lot of my handicap on these teams in this conference, can you stop the run? Absolutely not. They have no defensive linemen coming back. The linebacker core here with Mark Anthony Parker and Coleman Colley is pretty good, but I just don't expect them to stop the run. And so when you look at the teams on their schedule that can run the ball down their throat, Air Force rush attack is going to be an issue for Navy. Same with Tulsa. Same with UTSA. I think North Texas is going to have some success running the ball against them. Notre Dame, there's a potential for 5 losses in a row in the middle of this schedule. So I'm not going under 8.5. I'm going alt under 7.5 plus 125 here. There's going to be options in November to hedge out. The great thing about taking an alt under or an alt over with plus money is that you're going to be able to grab the money line in another situation to hedge against that. You don't have to worry about swallowing juice. You're going to be able to see it from way far away. Now, I don't think Navy is going to give me any problems with this number whatsoever. I make it 7.3. Not a fan of the rush offenses they're going to face, and the defensive line just doesn't do it for me in this conference.
All right, let's turn to another contender here in the American. That's UTSA, 7-6 last year, top 30 offense, outside of the top 90 in terms of defense. They've just been gutted by the portal on the defensive side for too many cycles, and it really caught up to them last year. Third in returning production in the American here. Is there going to be positive regression in terms of one-score games? Because across the last 2 years, 2-6 in those spots. We know the Trailer is one of the best G6 head coaches. Their win total settling in at 7.5, 9-2 to win the conference. It was huge to keep Owen McCown in San Antonio. That was one of their biggest moves in terms of the portal, the retention side of it. They got big play running back Will Henderson III. 2 of last year's top three receivers are back, and 3 offensive line starters, plus 2 more who started games returning. McCown remains, though, a bit of a gunslinger. If you listen to local beat writers, even when you read the little snippets from opposing coaches, he's someone who can get hot like he did against Tulane and ECU, where he can play like an offensive player of the year in the American. But DCs have also found that he can give it away with some really boneheaded decisions and put the ball in harm's way. Can this offensive staff, with a bit of a pace increase, take the ball out of his hands, give it a little bit more to Henderson, have some improved line play as well? Because you look at their line yards last year, they were 75th. If that improves, did they ride Henderson and cut down on his turnover-worthy plays purely by taking the ball out of his hands? That's a question that we'll have to see as the season progresses. The defense, though, has to fill holes yet again. It's been a recurring theme for defensive coordinator Jess Lepp. Only 8 players with 200-plus snaps return. They went the small school route, and they went for big on experience. That's what they were looking for in the portal, not necessarily these P4 guys that couldn't get onto the field. That combo, by the way, those two defensive backs combined for 10 picks and 20 pass breakups last year. So they're looking for guys who have a lot of snaps under their belt. Will that translate as they move up in weight class? We're going to see. There's reasons to believe that there's going to be an improvement here. I think that they're going to reach the AAC title game. I won't give away who I think that matchup's going to be and if I think they win it, but I do think that they get there because I like what they have on the offensive side of the ball. Collin, I'll go to you first. In terms of the momentum of this program overall, it was ascending. They were hitting double-digit wins. They made the conference switch, and it seems like they've hit a bit of a rough patch. And I'm just like, honestly, just from a viewing experience and someone who's bet on these guys and faded them at times, you don't necessarily always know what you're going to get. And sometimes it can be boom or bust. Certainly a team that plays different at the Alamo Dome than away from home. What's your overall gut feeling on how they're going to look this fall? And do you have any confidence enough to at least put a play in here preseason?
Well, this company that employs us is the ones that put #MeetMeep on the map. I'm not sure if anybody knew what UTSA football was until the Action Network and BBOC started calling it out, filling Twitter up with all kinds of Roadrunner stuff. We love this program. I don't think there's ever been a year we don't love this program. I mean, they have lucha libre wrestling matches outside the Alamo Dome. How can you not love this program? I would kill to have a helmet in my background at home. I'm not real comfortable with Owen McCown. Traylor came out at Media Day, said, look, he played the entire year injured and he never whined about it once. Well, what part of him was injured? Because his scrambles dropped from 43 to 17 last year from the year before. So was it a lower body injury that didn't allow him to get out of the pocket? And if that's true, why did his turnover-worthy play rate double, but his pressures and sack rates declined? What exactly was injured with you the entire season? Because you didn't scramble, and your turnover-worthy play rate shot through the roof, and you didn't have as much pressures. So the Owen McCown experience, I think, is still out there to be decided. I think the reason I project 8.4 and I'm not going over 7.5 is there are teams at the end of the schedule that I think are going to be completely different than the way the three of us talk about them today. Are we sure North Texas is going to be as bad as the way it's steaming in the market? Are we sure that Tulsa is going to, live up to a low projection that maybe I think they're a bowl team and Win Total would say they're not a bowl team. So when you have those kinds of teams at the end of your schedule and I'm within one win of your projection and where you are in the market, I'm not going to play you because I think there are teams that are going to go up and there are teams that are going to go down in this conference. And North Texas and Tulsa are those two that I think are going to go up. They're on the end of the schedule. And I don't know if McCown's going to be Mr. I can't make a big time throw and I can't leave the pocket, or if he's going to be full health again. Hard to tell.
Duck, to get you in here, the Rick Bowie edition, someone who follows the FCS level as closely as you do at Abilene Christian, the guy was an absolute wizard. Now, the Western Kentucky transition with Maverick McIver, he ends up, going to a backup quarterback, still put up some impressive numbers, and schematically, he can do some really interesting things. What do you expect this offense to look like? I talked a little bit about perhaps a pace increase, but in terms of the split between run and pass, do you think he'll ride the hot hand, or does he go back to kind of putting the ball in the quarterback's hands and saying, hey, spin this thing 40 times and let's see where the chips fall?
I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to seeing him throw the ball and start out that way, but you've got to hand the ball to Will Henderson. I think this is an SEC-level dude that's just absolutely waiting to break out. You've got a little bit of unproven talent at wide receiver, although I do like A.J. Wilson, and I think he'll be wide receiver one, get a lot of the target share. My problem with UTSA, there's a couple of things. This team is 5-13 straight up on the road over the last 3 seasons, and they've got some road tests. They've got some winnables on the road, but every year UTSA goes somewhere as a touchdown favorite, and they throw up a complete stinker. Is that going to be at Rice? Is that going to be at UAB this year and cost them a chance to get to the conference title game? This team has to win on the road. And then you've got some home games that are also fairly tough on paper. The run defense was as bad last year as it's been over the last 5 years. The Havoc numbers were way down compared to Briar's. Where is the triangle of toughness? And now you're relying on non-FBS transfers along the defensive line. Josiah Sampleton, Jeremiah Bailey. Are those guys going to be able to maximize their level of play beyond what they've done in prior seasons. You're getting non-FBS level transfers and smaller school transfers in the secondary, a pair of unproven transfers to join Owen Pee Wee in the linebacker room. So there are some things that give me pause. I think it's a fun bunch. I think the offense could be something that's a little bit more productive, but this defense has to get tougher, and it's been lacking for several years now.
Up next on the docket, the Memphis Tigers, 8-5 last year. Silverfield, who finished 50-25 at Memphis, one top 25 finish there in 2024. Bolts for the Arkansas job, as we mentioned. Big-time roster flip for Charles Huff, third-rated G6 class powered by that FedEx money. Great coordinators in the door for Huff as well. Kevin Decker from Old Dominion, Lance Guidry now reunited with him. Their win total also 7.5 plus 650 to win the conference. Decker, I mean, I think he's a great offensive coordinator. What he was able to do at ODU, turn Colton Joseph into an absolute dual threat demon, delivers the program's first 10-win season in the Sun Belt. Just incredible work there. 13 rushing touchdowns. Now he gets to choose between the former 4-star Aaron Nolan or the dual threat star from the D2 ranks out of West Florida, Marcus Stokes. At least early returns looks like it's going to be Stokes, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's a bit of a timeshare between these two. Guidry, by the way, reunites with Huff after serving as his defensive architect at Marshall. His defenses created relentless pressure for the Thundering Herd, 78 sacks in those 2 years. So he's somebody, if he has the right pieces as edge rushers, he's a great defensive coordinator. And look what he gets from Southern Miss. Jamon Tapp, he's firmly on NFL teams' radars. He's a terror off the edge. I think he's a shoe-in for double-digit sacks this year under Guidry's tutelage. I've seen enough with Huff, what he's done, essentially doing more with less. Now he has a roster that is upgraded from Marshall, upgraded to Southern Miss, upgraded now to Memphis. And I think this is going to be an opportunity if the right quarterback clicks, whether it's Nolan or Stokes. I think this offense is going to be able to run the football, and this defense is going to be able to create havoc. I'll go to you first on this one, Collin.
About over a year ago, when Charles Huff took the job at Southern Miss, I immediately was laying 40-1 on them to win the conference. Why? Because the guy can coach defense. He gets teams to listen. They had an influx of Marshall players. It was essentially Marshall dressed up as Southern Miss. Now it's Southern Miss dressed up as Memphis. Amazingly, Calabrese, you and I are the ones that are picking Memphis. I also have Memphis, a future on them to win this conference. I mean, look at what Southern Miss's defense ended up doing last year. And you could say, well, like Memphis has too many transfers. Well, first off, who doesn't? Second off, Charles Huff has more money than anybody right now in the AAC. So let's look at what he did with the Southern Miss roster last year, showing up with his players from Marshall, 6th in coverage, 18th in pass rush, 29th in PFF tackling, and 41st in defensive havoc. Oh yeah, Southern Miss was contending to go to the conference championship game until Charles Huff started interviewing for other jobs, got the Memphis job, and they lost the final 3 games of the regular season. He had his next job lined up in mid-November. I mean, that's the reason that Southern Miss flamed out at the end. So the question is, can we do this again? Kevin Decker, I couldn't believe the numbers that Old Dominion put up from the offensive side. Top 30 in rushing success rate, 22nd in line yards, 7th in pass EPA from Old Dominion. 3rd in pass explosives. I mean, these numbers, when you put the coordinators together with what Charles Huff has done with his players, it's something to watch. I mean, Marshall increased wins like almost every year he was there, 7, 9, 10. Then he gets out of there, because him and the AD, I think we're about to go in a WWE PLE event. I think the reason why you have to make this bet for the conference is because the strength of the team is the front 7. This is the best defensive front 7 outside of, we'll talk about Tulane. We could probably argue it there, but outside of that, this is the best defensive front 7 in the conference, and they have the ability to stuff the run. You look at the teams that they're facing. Go and cross-reference who can run the ball and who has an offensive line. Memphis is going to shut them down. I like Memphis also. I got them at plus 750.
Now, Duck, you have some problems with this schedule, and I think it's fair, although I'm going to push back in some spots, like catching Navy late when they have so many weeks in a row without a bye week. I think their bye week falls in, week 3? So perhaps they're leaking oil at that point. But beyond that, let's put the schedule aside. What do you think about this roster construction?
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. I will say a lot of the roster that came over from Southern Miss, 17 players came over from Southern Miss, and a lot of those players were at Marshall, but it's less and less of what the cornerstone defense was that led Marshall to the Sun Belt Championship. And Huff did have up and down seasons. It was 6 wins, then 9 wins, then 6 wins, then 10 wins. During that 10-win campaign at Marshall, they did win 5 one-score games. A couple of those they were very fortunate to have won. I'm worried about how this Memphis team flamed out last year, and also how Southern Miss flamed out. I will say there's a decent chance that started to happen when Charles Huff was looking at other jobs, but they really fell hard losing their last 4 games in embarrassing fashion. I mean, they were the front runner with the door wide open to go to the conference title game. All they had to do was win one of those final 3, and they couldn't win any of them. And the talent, the consistent performing talent at Memphis offensively that goes out the door either via graduation or the portal, I don't know if everybody that is brought in is going to be able to appropriately replace that. We've seen in the market already in week 1 money move against Memphis. I think it's a tough spot going to Vegas. I think they're dead on arrival when they go to Boise in week 3. I don't know if this is going to immediately provide the injection and the performance that Memphis is going to need to run through the conference. I just wasn't there. I think that they can lose a couple games early. I won't be stunned if they're in a dogfight, a low-scoring dogfight with Arkansas State, who many people at Action Network think is going to be improved this year. I don't know. I feel like this is just such an ask for these guys to win 8 games. And you know what? They could still end up 7-5, and if it's the right combination of losses, maybe they get there and maybe they get on a roll. We'll see. I don't think that this is not a team I hate more than anyone else. It's not that way at all, but I projected a lower number, and I didn't think to expect 8 wins in Huff's first season was appropriate. So I did play a win total under 7.5.
All right, let's go and talk about Army. 7-6 last year. They took a step back after losing Captain America at quarterback. Who could blame them there? They're 75th in returning production this season, which is pretty decent for the G6. Cale Helms returns at quarterback. They were 6-4 in games that he started last year. Their win total set at 7.5. Conference futures 7-1. Let's just get rid of the big issue, the stumbling block, so to speak, with this team. 4 new starters on the offensive line should give all of us pause. Now, Brady Small at center is back, and he's the rock. He was a part of that Joe Moore award-winning line in 2024. What's nerve-wracking about betting this total in either direction is they played in 9 one-score games last year, and by the projections, we're going to get more of that. We could have 10 games that end up as toss-ups on this schedule. So it's a stay away for me. I got plenty of action here in the American. I never like to root against the service academies, but if you told me they went 4-8 or they went 8-4, I'm not blinking at either of those outcomes because of the way that this team is constructed, the continuity they have in their coaching staff. Helms, if he stays healthy, I think gives them a puncher's chance in just about every single game to win. So I'll start with you, Duck. How do you see a team that you can approach it from lots of different angles? You can poke holes, or you can say that you have confidence in different position groups. It's just, can they handle the pressure and not make the mistakes?
I think Army struggled badly last year trying to create what they wanted to identify their offense as after losing a lot of the star power that carried them in 2024. They split reps between Helms and Dwayne Coleman at quarterback. They never really settled it until about halfway through the year. We saw Army just stuck in the mud with their situational execution, 3rd and short, 4th and short, things that were automatic for Jeff Monken started to become such a struggle, and they really never had a plan. I think they started to find that plan, and I think they'll be a little bit more consistent offensively this year. The offense will be so much better equipped if Helms does not rush the ball 302 times. They were so reliant on him down the stretch, and that has to change. I think God's power can be a back that's ready to shine. I think having a fully healthy Jake Rendina back in the mix at fullback is a positive for Army. I think Samari Howard is a guy who could shine as a pitch man. The offensive line is going to be a catalyst. They've got 4 guys back. They're going to be a strong American offensive line. I don't think this group is going to take a step back offensively. I think they're going to be more potent. It's really the defense that has significant questions for me. Pass coverage is going to struggle. The Havoc numbers are also going to end up down like they were last year. Army will have zero resemblance of a pass rush. They only returned 3 starters from last year's defense, and I don't think that the undersized defensive line is going to be able to get any pressure whatsoever on the opposition, and that's going to create situations where Army's going to give up explosives. I mean, the sack numbers, the tackle for loss numbers were way down last year, and anybody that has a competent offensive line and a competent passing attack is going to shred these guys. What I would look to do is, again, Army could get hot, and they have a schedule where there are wins on the schedule. So this is one of the 9 teams that I think if things break their way, they could be in contention. I passed on the regular season win total, and I'm not super interested in buying these guys on a futures ticket.
Now, Collin, I'm sure you're going to get into their lack of pass defense and the issue that they're not aided by a successful pass rush, or at least on paper, what they're bringing to the table in week 1. But when you start to go down the menu of the teams that are going to play, sure, FAU is going to throw it all over the yard. But without that many teams that are going to be pass first to victimize them, do you think they're going to squeak by in some of these one possession games? Or do you think they're still going to find a way to be on the losing side of many of these coin flips?
One possession games is the key in that question that you asked me, because when I popped open this schedule and was asked to handicap Army for this year, I thought, oh my gosh, I project 11 games within 6 points. So you're going to have to go a little bit step further to do a handicap on Army this year. And since I have an under on Navy already, let's just make sure I verify my Collin Wilson nickname and do an under here too. Of those 11 games, 8 of them I think are losses. And I'll tell you why. Because to beat Army, get into their secondary, like Duck said, and be able to stop the triple. Now let's review who these 8 losses are going to be. South Florida might have the best receivers in the conference and a top 3 defensive line. Loss. La Tech comes off of a bye, has one of the best tight end wide receiver combinations in the Sun Belt with Eli Finley and Jalen Mickens for quarterback Blake Baker. Loss. Tulane, off of a bye, can defend the triple. Loss. FAU is going to destroy the Army secondary. Sure, maybe Army's got a little bit of a punch in them. They got FAU kind of punch in them? I doubt it. Loss. Tulsa, top 6 defensive line linebacker unit in the AAC, top 3 running back wide receiver combo. Don't want to talk about them too much till we get there. Loss. Memphis can defend the triple. We've already covered that. Loss. Air Force has a more explosive offense. Loss. ECU has a top 3 receiver unit, top 6 defensive line and linebackers. ECU doesn't have an offensive line, but it doesn't matter against Army. Loss. 8 losses I see on this schedule. Under 7.5 alt total plus 115. Collin Wilson has spoken.
All right, let's transition to the Green Wave. As I mentioned, they went to the college football playoff last year, 11-3. John Summerall off to Florida. Cupboard's pretty bare here. 117th in returning production for Will Hall, who famously crashed and burned at Southern Miss. Yet, just rolling out the helmets. You got, all the feel-good vibes there in New Orleans. The win total still sitting at 7.5. We'll see if that's a little bit rich when we get into it. Conference 7-1. Let's just start with Hall, an underwhelming hire. I don't quite get it because, not only were they able to get a guy like Willie Fritz and then to backfill him with Summerall and keep the momentum going, but then they go with Hall. And he's somebody who likes to build around a featured back. You saw him do it with Frank Gore Jr. when it was working a little bit at Southern Miss. Jamari McClure is a great piece to build around. There's one problem. He's already hurt in fall camp. He has a foot injury that's likely going to hold him out for 1 or 2 games. Now, they have a little bit of depth in that running back room, a guy like Jalen Lucas from Florida State, but they're not McClure. The whole plane was supposed to be built out of McClure. I think this is a big red flag right out of the gate. At quarterback, it's still a 2-man race between Caden Simonza and Zion Chris Gramillion. What's interesting between those two, by the way, in terms of trying to preview for what this is going to look like, it depends who's piloting the offense. Because Simonza is the passer with a little rushing upside, and Chris is the runner who leaves a lot to be desired as a pocket passer. I mean, we can turn to the OC here as perhaps Attell Russ Callaway had major success at Samford with an air raid offense. They were first in passing, 4th in total offense back in 2018. But that may be ancient history, and he's trying to work with the pieces that he does have. So how do you square this offense when McClure may be hurt? Chris, it's just not much of a downfield passer. I've seen enough on him. I think the book is properly written up. So let's start there, Duck. There's still plenty to like on this defense. The secondary looks potentially great with Shine, Chen Chu at safety. They got exciting transfers like Kwan Banks from USF, Marquez Stevenson from Texas Tech, Anthony Rogers from Nichols. But they need someone to pop at the edge, I think, for all of it to come together. If it does that buy them enough time offensively to cobble things together, in your opinion?
I don't know. I don't have a lot here on Tulane. This is a team that's hard for me to figure out. I don't love the coaching hire. They lose 9 all-conference selections from last year. Most of the offensive line is gone. I don't love that they're still unsettled at quarterback. They need to have a clear vision and direction for what they wanted to do. I think they wanted to hand the ball to McClure, and now that he's injured, I think the offense is going to be a little bit of a struggle. There is a little bit of talent on the defensive line that came in. Ed Smith, Jordan McAllister, Jordan Guidry. They could be feisty, but again, there's too many unknowns for me, so I don't have a lot here on this bunch. Be surprised if the coaching hire works out.
Colin, as I mentioned, it's such a weird phenomenon for the laundry, for the logo of Tulane to mean a positive thing, because basically they went from Tommy Bowden and Rich Rod in '98, perfect season, to being lost in the wilderness for like 20 years before Willie Fritz rescued this program. And now
Mm-hmm.
the market seems to be like, well, it's Tulane. They'll find a way to win 8 or 9 games. I'm not there. Are you down on the green wave here with so many questions and their bell cow back already banged up?
I think Tulane fans can spend a little bit more time at their crawfish broils with their Dixie beers outside the stadium instead of watching this team this year. Hall, Will Hall comes in. Hall Ball comes in. He retains some of Summerall's staff. He wants to do the pro style identity, and he wants to keep that in place. And at media days, he says we're kind of 10 years into a sustained foundation. A lot of that will stay the same. Is that lazy or is that smart? I've been kind of like going back and forth. Like Hall's like, I'm not changing anything, keeping the coaches, keeping the way we do things around here. Okay, sure. But let's talk about your quarterback, because Chris is pretty bad. I don't care what his TD to INT ratio is. If you go into his history of throwing the ball, he's got 11 big time throws to 26 turnover worthy plays. The defense was always going to be the team that's going to lead Tulane to victories. The ceiling for this team is 7 wins, because they're going to lose to Duke and K-State. And when you get these, we're missing out on our best running back. My offensive line was already in the bottom half of the AAC. There's just not going to be a lot of offense here for me to believe in them. And this coaching staff is just too many questions for me. Under 6.5, a very juicy plus 140 on the alt line. Your hedge spot, second to the last game of the season against North Texas. That one should stay within 3 or 4 points, and you'll be able to get out of it any way you need. So I definitely like the under here. You're not getting a lot of offense.
All right, let's talk about another team that's potentially polarizing here with our little panel. East Carolina Pirates, 9-4 last year, 110th in returning production. But in terms of what they lost, Caden Hauser off for Illinois, Yannick Smith to SMU, their best pass rusher, or arguably their best pass rusher, Landon Montgomery to Florida. Both coordinators gone. Yet their win total set at 7.5, 10-1 to win the conference. That's the downside. The upside is Jordan Davis comes in at OC off his amazing work at North Texas. A really strong portal class headlined by Ray Joseph at wide receiver, at least from a blue chip perspective. Ashton Gray, who I think could be a plug and play guy here and certainly go for over 1,000 yards. Two interesting quarterback options, though, and I want to get your take on it from both of you. Mitch Griffiths and Amori Williams. Are they going to be able to do anything in front of this offensive line? Because it could be a mess, particularly in the early going. The defense restocked in the portal at all 3 levels, and Gamble and Levels Mitchell in the secondary should slide right in as starters. But losing Montgomery and also Zion Wilson gutted their pass rush. That worries me. When you have concerns on both sides of the trenches, that's something that kind of scares me away off of a team that overperformed and had great coaching last year. But as I mentioned, both coordinators gone. So with so much uncertainty, you think to yourself, all right, let's just play the under until you get to the schedule, and they only draw one of the top 3 projected teams in the American, and then they get the dregs. They play all 3 of the bottom feeders. I'll go to you first, Colin. Does the schedule give them enough leeway to be able to figure things out on the fly, or do you think there's just too much upheaval and the quarterbacks probably won't pop enough to paper over some of these issues?
Are you surviving Alabama without injury? I ask that out of the first game. And then, Old Dominion's defense is nasty. Like really nasty. I can't even, so there are, I know people will see NC Central and App State, my love for Dowell Loggins, but look, this is a schedule that could get some guys hurt. And if they get some hurt, that's going to really spell bad for the rest of the season. And you already mentioned the offensive line trench is going to be one of the worst in the AAC. Once you get past that, you've already mentioned Mitch Griffiths. How is this guy still playing college football? Are we going the Brandon Weeden route, right? Like what, 8-9 years? Who else do we have in there? There's a couple quarterbacks that were in college football forever, and this guy's, I think, in his 6th year career, 10 big time throws, 24 turnover worthy plays. I have lost a lot of money on Wake Forest games that he played, and I have not forgotten it. Emory Williams, though, I am a little bit more impressed with his numbers. We'll see if he takes a step forward. 2.3 seconds time to throw. That is below an average of 2.5. I like that he's quick with the guy. Maybe he's not accurate. Maybe he's not as, he can't be as bad as Mitch Griffiths, but at least you're quick getting the ball out of your hands. So those are things that I like about it. My projection is right in line with the number on the board. So I'm going to pass on this one and be quick on it. But look, when you have teams like Alabama to start off in your non-conference play and you're a G6 team, I automatically start wondering about injuries, especially when you have an offensive line. You might not even have enough guys without any experience or any talent playing that position. You're going to get wrecked by the Bama defensive line. Not for me. I'm out on this one.
All right, Duck, you are enamored with the schedule. I think as we all should be, because there's just going to be a lot of potential fool's gold. You feel like you're panning the river and you're saying, this is a great head coach. They're going to find a way to do it. And if they get the wins are wins. I'm not going to go ahead and, split hairs on it. So you like them, but not just to go over the win total. You're actually taking a flyer on them to win the conference. I'm going to need a little salesmanship here on this one. So I'm thinking about walking off the lot. You're going to bring me back into your office and be like, sit down for a second. Let me tell you about why ECU is going to win this thing.
Well, there's a couple of reasons. I thought replacing the coordinators, Blake Harrell did an excellent job. He's done a fantastic job over his year and a half, going 14-5 at East Carolina. Once the quarterback battle gets settled, which will be interesting to see what they do with Mitch Griffiths or Emory Williams, but you've got two plug-and-play running backs, not only Ashton Gray from North Texas, but Michael Allen from Marshall comes in. You've got a nice 1-2 punch there. I do think the schedule early calls for the offensive line to be able to kind of figure some things out. They're not going to beat Alabama, and nobody expects them to do that. But in the non-conference with three regional rivals, I think they could fare actually fairly decently. And the offensive line does have they've got some size. I don't know how talented it's going to be, but the offense is going to be North Texas-esque. They're going to run the ball a little bit. They're going to take some deep shots. It's going to be the quick passing game, get the ball out of the quarterback's hands. I think that can work with the talent that they have on the offensive line. I actually don't think the defensive line shapes up to be too bad. Josiah Robinson comes in, Julian Davis, Kieran Davis is there. There's some guys on East Carolina's defensive line that are going to create some havoc. Blake Harrell has been a defensive mastermind since coming to East Carolina, and he still has his fingerprints really all over this group. They're hole pluggers in the interior of the defensive line. You've got gap shooters in the backer group. I think East Carolina will continue to create havoc and force opposing quarterbacks to make quick decisions. There are 2 or 3 tougher games in league play, but this team, really the floor as far as league wins is going to be 5-3. And if they pull an upset or two on the road on a Thursday on a game they shouldn't win, you're absolutely looking at a team that's going to fight for the conference title. I think they can beat App State in the non-conference. I think they can beat Old Dominion, who's going through some quarterback change. They lose their stud running back to Tulsa. North Carolina Central is not going to provide a ton of challenge. I want to buy into a coach who had a decent portal haul, who replaced the coordinators appropriately. You've got a schedule that's conducive to racking up the wins and a team that can gain momentum and confidence as the season goes on and on. If they were playing an extremely difficult American Conference schedule, it would be a very different sort of conversation on a win total of 7.5. But what's the floor on this team? 6-6. If everything were to go terribly, 7-5. It doesn't take much to get this team into a tiebreaker scenario where they could be one of those teams that gets in. So yeah, I like East Carolina. It's a juicy price. I think this is a talented team. I think the portal churn was better than people are giving it credit for. The coordinator replacement with who they brought in is very good. I think this defense is going to be tough once again.
All right, South Florida, 9-4 last year. Huge wins over Boise, Florida. Goalish Bolts takes Byron Brown with him in tow to the Plains. Good for those guys. What's left is 113th in terms of returning production as a program. Lots of holes on defense. But what's interesting is Bill Conley, SP Plus, puts their chances of getting to 6 wins and bowl eligible at 93.5%. Explains why the win total is sitting at 8.5, plus 650 to win the conference. Now, I get it. You hired Brian Hartline because of his recruiting chops at Ohio State. And all he did was go out this year in this cycle and get 10 former blue chippers, 24 players in total from P4 rosters, the best G6 class. So job well done there. But he's also a recruiter of coaches. And Tim Beck was his choice as OC. I get the personal connections and the time together at Ohio State, but his NC State offenses by the end were not very good. Ask fan bases in Nebraska, Columbus, Ohio, Texas what they think of him. Predictable as a play caller is a common complaint. Failure to develop quarterbacks is also on his resume. Can he get the most out of Michael Van Buren? Because he has flashed big-time potential in limited duty at LSU. He went nuts in the bowl game, almost 300 total yards, 3 TDs, no turnovers. But in Mississippi State the year before that, when he had way more exposure, starts, snaps, he took too many sacks. He wasn't all that accurate. So we'll see what he can do with an entire offseason of being the big man on campus and working with Beck. Also, it's worth noting, Is this going to be more up tempo, or is it going to be more what Hartline did at Ohio State from a slowdown perspective? That's going to be really interesting from a gambling deliverable. We need to find out as soon as possible. Also, be listening into the beat writers, later in August, because if there's any tipping of that hand, some of these totals could be off by a full touchdown. So something to monitor. I mentioned recruiting coaches, because if I'm going to ding him on Tim Beck, I'm going to give him his flowers on Josh Aldridge as his DC. Havoc was his calling card. The Pirates took the ball away and lived in opponents' backfields last year for ECU, and he was an elite red zone play caller. ECU finished 4th in touchdown percentage allowed on defense. He's a big-time rising star in his mid-30s. I think this is going to be his last stop before he gets a P4 job. So for what it's worth, Aldridge called plays, by the way, against that Army team last year as ECU's DC, held him to 290 total yards and just 6 points. So I really do believe we're going to be looking at a 4-1 or 5-0 USF, getting into October. Every game on the schedule is winnable across the board, but I can't quite get there in terms of their conference future and the opportunity to even crash the party in the AAC title game with Beck as the OC. I'll go to you first, Collin.
Yeah, and Brian Hartline getting hired, I figured if he was going to be in some sort of CEO role, that'd have been great here at South Florida, because he got his play calling duties taken away from him at Ohio State. I mean, things needed to change, and Ryan Day made a change. And so when he came down here, I thought, okay, well, we're going to get a little bit of a slow offense. We're probably going to, feature a couple of things, but, Beck's pro style is going to come in. So what kind of offense are we going to run here? Are we sure Temple is a win? I mean, they're traveling to UTSA 5 days later after that. Is Brian Hartline the kind of coach? I always go back to my days with Houston Nutt when I was in college. Like, the guy lost consecutively all the time. Like, he could not pick his team up week after week. Like, they would lose a big game, they'd lose the next one, then they'd lose the next one. But when he got on a heater, he'd be on a heater. Like, the guy knew how to be on streaks. And so my question with Brian Hartline is, what kind of head coach are you going to be? Are you good at picking your team up 5 days later, going on the road to San Antonio and taking on our meet? So, Kent and UAB, those are wins. There's a lot of wins on this schedule. My numbers say over 8.5 plus 115, but I can't do it because I don't know the identity of the offense, and I don't trust Tim. I don't trust Beck in calling any kind of offense whatsoever. So it's like a personal thing where I can't get out of the way of the mathematics. So numbers say over 8.5 at a juice plus 115, but I'm not going to bet it.
All right, are you with us, Duck, here that it probably should be an over, but probably not quite enough to win this conference because of the limitations in the coaching staff?
I wonder how this is all going to come out in the wash. Collin, you and I were talking off air many days ago. I need to know what the pace looks like. It's such a stunning contrast in styles between Tim Beck, who likes to go at this breakneck quick pace, and Hartline, who operated at one of the slowest tempos in the country when he was calling plays for Ohio State. And is there going to be a power struggle? Is there going to be a strange dynamic where two guys are talking at each other and we don't know which one's going to supersede the other? And so the game against FIU, if you bet on the game or if you don't have any money on the game, you need to watch the game and you need to check the pregame markets, because we need to get an idea of what this pace is going to look like. And that'll give us valuable insight on what these totals should do against teams that are coming down the pipe. If it's fast-paced, the game against Army should be an over. If it's slow-paced, the game against Bowling Green should be an under. They should blast Kent State in the middle of the season either way. And I think the front seven can be pretty tough. You look at the transfers that they brought in: C.J. Hicks, Marshawn Oxley, Redwood. Michael Williams was a holdover from last year. I think it's a decent bunch on the defensive line. And so that's maybe a cornerstone of their defense that they can kind of hang their hat on.
I think this is a good time to put in a PSA, right? I mean, let's take a step back here. And how do you gamble in July and August on college football? I need the most information possible on a team. And if I have transparency on rosters, how the coaches behave, the coordinators, the styles, I can easily project that against the schedule and say, I can tell you that's going to be a loss. I can tell you that's going to be a win. But with this, we have so many unknown variables. What is Brian Hartline as a coach? What's his offense going to look like? Is there potential right now? They don't even know what it is because of the quarterback competition, right? And then what you have is a couple of teams that we're going to talk about with second-year coaches in their spot with full transparency of the rosters. That's enough information to bet on. So when you bet in July and August, you need as many data points as possible and information on the team. And South Florida doesn't give you enough about who they are, what they're going to be. Like, it's just kind of cloudy. I mean, I can give you numbers all day and say they're projected by 16 over Kent State, 19 over Kent State, right? 42 over Delaware State. It doesn't matter. You don't know what this team is going to be because they haven't tipped their hand and shown us what they are. And frankly, I don't think they know what they are. So even though Bill can project 80, 99% that they're going to finish here, and I can project 100% they're going to finish, it doesn't matter because we don't have the variables on this team. But I am looking forward to two teams we're going to talk about with coaches we know and trust, rosters we know and trust. That's teams you can bet on, not South Florida.
Yeah, if it's Cromanhawk, I am deeply concerned because that man is a statue, and I can't get it out of my mind. That Florida game where he took 8 sacks in 2024, that's enough to be able to derail not just a quarterback room, but an entire offense. So if he's named the starter and Van Buren can't separate, that's a big problem. All right.
I read the reports yesterday that were published on August 10th from South Florida's camp, and it is 50-50 split, and there is a dead heat. It is an absolute dead heat.
To Boca Raton, Florida for FAU. 4-8 last year, but they are the only AAC program returning its complete staff. Their offensive play caller, head coach, defensive coordinator, and its starting quarterback in Caden Beltcamp. 19th in returning production, so hope springs eternal there. Tops in the AAC, tops among G6 programs in terms of returning production. Bill Connolly gives them a 67% chance to make a bowl. Their win total sitting right at that line, 5.5. Conference future, 17-1. I'm going to go on them to make a bowl game here. I think if some of these guys or all these guys hit, I'm not asking for the world. I'm saying climb into the top 100 defenses in America. And when you pair it with this offense, because we know what we're getting. We got Beltcamp, we got Messner. They're known offensive weapons. You keep an eye on a guy like Leonard Farrow, who rushed for 1,400 yards, 8 yards per carry at Fairmont State. They went for guys who put it on tape and looked great doing it. The question for me and this entire thing between them getting to 6-6, cashing the ticket, feeling good, and then all of a sudden kind of being in the mix for an invite to the American title game, if they really play well on the offensive line, because a big part of their turnover woes, which sunk them in 2025, was that Beltcamp absolutely folded under constant pressure. 17 interceptions. In this system, he shouldn't be having 24 turnover-worthy plays. Can he clean that up? I want to see it first. I'm still going to go with the preseason over on this number, but I think I'll get real excited about this team if all of a sudden, whether it's from a scheme perspective, sliding protections, max protect, getting the ball out of his hands faster, or even the offensive line just run blocking a little bit better and maybe cutting in to that run-pass ratio just a little bit, then all of a sudden I think this is a team that can win 8 or 9 games. I'll go to you first, Duck. What do you think about FAU?
I thought Florida Atlantic deserved a lot better than 4-8 last year. We saw Kitley learn a lot about how to be a head coach and how to manage in-game situations, and we saw that through the pain points of doing it the wrong way, the flippant going for it on 4th down, irrespective of where you were at on the field, disregarding the field goal operation in the red zone. Those were critical decisions in games that cost FAU chances to win time and time again. I think that they will be less flippant about doing some of those things. It's okay to punt from your own 37 on 4th and 8 instead of going for it. It's okay to kick a field goal at times in the red zone. Kate Veldkamp coming back from injury. He was hurt last year and suffered through it, and that could be something that was provoking some of the turnover problems which plagued FAU week in and week out, and I think getting him fully back is critical. They have 3 reliable receiver options after what I consider to be an exceptional portal haul. You're getting RJ Garcia in and Dominique Henry to complement Easton Messer, who will catch 100 passes this year if he stays healthy. I think that FAU could have put 11 folding chairs out there on defense last year, and they may have been tougher on defense than what they showed. But they have a great defensive line. Get CJ Doggett, Jonathan Bax, Deshaun Batiste, Enyai Sledge goes 6'3", 320 in the middle and can plug holes. Jay Crable is a good defender. I really think Florida Atlantic beefed up some of their defensive line. We saw that team really struggle last year to get any sort of pressure on opposing quarterbacks. The sack numbers suffered other than about 2 or 3 games where they had 5 or 6 the rest of the year, 14 sacks in the other 10 games. FAU, they do draw a tough schedule. They only avoid Memphis of the top contenders. They play everybody else, and they don't play UAB. They don't play Charlotte. So the conference schedule is tough. But I think this team is vastly improved. I thought 5.5 wins was a win too low. I would go over that number. The schedule is the only concern for pause on if I'm ready to say that the Owls are going to jump to potential conference contention. But this is going to be a vastly improved team. I think you get Veltkamp fully healthy if he can avoid injury. The receiver group, they've got some dynamic running backs, and I think they'll run the ball a little bit more and not have as drastic of splits as they did last season. I think that this team has a lot of what they can take from the tough learning experiences and taking their licks last year and apply it this year. But the defensive upgrades are really what is going to power this team.
This is the most owl-dense conference in America with 3 of them to discuss here. Are you going owl the way with us here, Collin, and going over on 5.5? Or are you even more ambitious on FAU?
It's the first of the 3 owls, right? Yeah. So here, I mean, look, it's my favorite GIF, whatever you call it in the world. Shout out to my old buddy and now new buddy to you guys, Phil Steele, who pointed out FAU is the only FBS program in the entire full staff and its starting quarterback returning. I just talked about how I need information like that so I can see if I can make an informed decision. I think with these guys, I can. I did over 6.5 plus 150. I did the juice because there's a span of games. I think 4 of the last 5 games. What do I like? Velkamp's numbers were really, really identical from Western Kentucky to FAU. There wasn't a drop off at all. Even his big time throw to turnover worthy play rate, even pressure, sack rate, everything was the same. So there wasn't a drop off. Now he's fully stocked. And Easton Messer, 517 snaps out of the slot, more than 2 yards per route run. That's a laser slashing across your zone coverage. Hey, I'm over 6.5. I see a minimum of 6 wins here and a plethora of games in November. If I need to hedge out, I can.
Fair enough. Looks like we're all on those Owls. 2 more to go. But first, North Texas. The Mean Green, 12-2 last year, finished first in the country in SP plus offense. Mass exodus, though, as we know. Eric Morris, Mestamaker, Hawkins, all headed north for Oklahoma State. Win total has come down considerably, now sitting at 5.5, 22-1 to win the conference. Just how bare is this cupboard is the question. They're 132nd in returning production. Yes, Neil Brown returns to the G6 ranks as a head coach after his highly successful run at Troy, where he went 31-8 from 2016 to 2018. But this is a year 0 rebuild from scratch. Offensive line is decimated, 135th in experience, which in my opinion throws cold water on their best offensive weapon, which is Jaheim White. Over 1,600 rushing yards in 2 years in Morgantown, explosive. But can the offensive line open holes, and is he 100% back coming off of season-ending knee injury? These are questions that would keep me up at night if I had an over on North Texas. Taven Jackson, he screams bridge starter to me. So is it time to just let it rip with Chris Jimerson, the redshirt freshman, or Chasten Didda? I think they would be wise to get those guys some reps this season. I love Corey Milliner from UAB as a wide receiver. He's an alpha in this pass-catching group. But outside of him, I guess Max Reese, you could talk yourself into some optimism at the tight end position. We'll see schematically just how many targets they get them. Defense is anyone's guess because of the roster churn. Secondary reeled in some P4 talent like Baylor's Caden Jenkins at corner, Kashawn Davila from Arkansas at safety. Another Woo Pig Suey reference, but that's the best we can do to put some optimism and some positive spin on this, because I have to kick it to you at this point, Collin, because I know we've grown accustomed to discussing teams with extreme roster makeovers. But where do you even start with a year 0 with Neil Brown? This retread hire, there's a lot of guys who are looking at, reclamation projects, hoping to finally get their careers turned around at the same time. They're all meeting in Denton under the shadow of the best season in school history. There's just a lot to live up to, and I'm not sure they can even get to bowl eligibility.
Look, first off, I love Neil Brown, okay? But that's not the reason I'm taking it over here. I mean, this is a guy that was projected to finish dead last in the Big 12 and then won 9 games. I don't really doubt what he can do when he's got what he wants. I mean, West Virginia just had so much turnover back when the transfer portal was new. He never was able to get his footing in at that job, but he was fantastic at Troy. Now, I know he's got to start all over here, but from everything I've read, Jaheim White is completely healthy. I mean, he was injured last year, but he has a career yards after first contact, 4. 3.4 is pretty decent. 4 yards after first contact, 14 TDs. That's impressive. The other thing, too, is Matt Powledge, right? Because Matt Powledge was at Baylor, and Caden Jenkins comes in after having the last 3 years of Baylor. Well, the reason he's not at Baylor is because he was dismissed for breaking rules multiple times. 7 PBUs in 2024. He's had over 1,200 career snaps. He's been targeted 74 times in his career and only given up 5 TDs. Now, when you got kicked off the team for breaking rules and your old defensive coach decides to bring you down to North Texas, how bad were those rules? I'm like, he either learned his lesson and he prayed for forgiveness, or maybe they weren't that bad. Maybe it was a person, just a whole difference in attitude or something. I don't know, but that tells me a lot there if Caden Jenkins can stay on the field and not get into trouble. I think, there's other things here. I think North Texas is going to be a different team in the second half of the season than they are in the first half of the season. And I penalized them hardcore, guys. Like I took, from a PR perspective, I took 9 points off their PR from a TARP perspective, right? Just from everything they lost. 9 points off your power rating is pretty extreme. I took a point off them for going from Eric Morris to Neil Brown. I took a point off them for second order win total. Like they are the most decremented team that I had in the offseason just based on mathematical things that I consider going into the next year. I still have them going over this win total.
All right, let's touch gloves here, Duck, because you're coming in on the under with a vengeance. Please cut out Collin's legs from under him on this one.
Well, in fairness, the win total has been consistently pegged at 6 or 6.5 for several years at North Texas. Last year, the win total was 6.5 and even 5.5 in some places. And North Texas just experienced their most successful run in program history as far as the season that they had last year. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about who's not there. Collin can cover that when he covers the Big 12. But the win total this year, with all of the departures and all the talent lost and the huge portal churn and the coaching staff brought in, the win total was the same. I just didn't think that was appropriate. And so, full transparency, I bet under 6.5, and it's a position I took early in the spring. A lot of people were able to do that with me, but that's a number that's no longer there. I think it's a big churn. I think it's a big ask for Neil Brown to do much more than bowl eligibility with this program. And I was looking through this roster, and I was thinking about this team being a complete fade. And it's not. The roster is not in that bad a shape. North Texas is going to run a 4-2-5. They want to avoid getting in shootouts. I think they're really going to make a concerted effort to stop the explosiveness and really make their opponents be methodical. So there could be some value with that information if we see it play out. I thought when looking at this roster, at the schedule, at everything else, when 6.5 flashed, I thought it was such a premium to pay on these guys with what they lost. This offense is going to look nothing like what it looked like last year. All the explosiveness, the fun bunch with Mestamaker throwing it around, it's not going to be that. I project that they start the season 1-4, and from there, a good coach with a decent roster that he's trying to tinker with can try to get this team to fight and claw and scratch to possibly get to a bowl game. So I do think 6-6 is the absolute ceiling after a potential 1-4 start. But I don't think that this team is complete garbage like I thought I was going to at the beginning of the summer.
On to a team that we're hoping is no longer complete garbage, and that's the Temple Owls. They make a great hire in Casey Keeler. He goes 5-7 in their maiden voyage, but they lost to Army and Navy by 1 point apiece, and then they collapsed it late in the season. It just, the bottom fell out from under them. They're 64th in returning production. Offense could be pretty potent if Jackson Smolik or Shepard pop, because they have a super veteran offensive line in front of them, 4th in overall experience, which is 1st in the G6. 2 returning backs that averaged over 6 yards per carry in Hunter Smith and Kevin Mason. An experienced pass catcher like Peter Clark at tight end, who may be one of the best at the G6 level. Their win total sitting right there at will they or won't they make a bowl game, 5.5. Conference long shot, 27-1. The reason why the market is still soft on them is obvious. It's the defense. They played a ton of guys last fall, but they got mauled, particularly late in the season. 109th in SP plus defense as a finish. But when you look at those last 4 games, they gave up 37 points per game. So they were not close. Now you have to give, some continuity and Keeler's defensive acumen some credit, but he really is banking on some small school finds on the recruiting trail. He scoured the JUCO ranks. He landed 5 players from that level of football. He also finds a small school player like Kevin Hornbeek from Tiffin, one of the best small school linemen, I should say, a 5th-year senior, could be a difference maker in the trenches. They desperately need it because they were 130th in line yards on the defensive end. So, as a unit here, I'll go to you first, Collin. Do we trust Keeler to get the defense right, to get them even close to the top 100? Or do they fall apart early because they run into Penn State, Toledo, Army, South Florida in a 4-week window that can absolutely burst their bubble in terms of overall confidence?
It's hard to go against Casey Keeler because a year ago everybody said he's crazy. Like, why are you going to Temple? Oh, it's kind of like home for him. Okay, still, you're going to Temple, right? And he obviously knew what he was doing. And if you look at his history, Delaware year 2, he went from 6-6 to 15-1. Year 2 at Sam Houston, FCS semifinal. That was a year after he went to the semifinal before that. Year 2, migrating to FBS with Sam Houston, he went from 3-9 to 9-3. So I think the problem is the defense is so bad and it projects so bad on this team. It's hard to sit here and say, oh yeah, they're absolutely going to be better just based on Casey Keeler's entire history of what he's done with programs in year 2. This is going to be one of the best offensive lines in the AAC, and they're going to need to grind some drives to keep that defense off the field. I do love their tight end, Peter Clark. He's only had 30 catches, 24 of them were first down, 6 TDs. I mean, that guy's a first down TD machine whenever he catches the ball. So, on offense, they have some things they can do, but you're not beating Penn State. You're not beating South Florida. At South Florida, you're at Navy, you're not beating them. You're at Memphis, you're not beating them. So, you're going to be underdogs at Toledo and East Carolina. The ceiling here is 6 wins. So as much as I love Temple, I am not fading Casey Keeler. As bad as the defense is, I'm not fading Casey Keeler. So I'm not playing them. It's going to be a week-to-week play for me on the Owls.
Duck, I think we're all in lockstep here where we have such deep respect for Keeler, what he was able to do the first half of the season, really showing some fight in year 1, which should have been a year 0, but such a concerning November. And, perhaps it's the sticker shock in the bad way where you're not seeing the power 4 guys come in. You're not seeing the insane measurables. You're not seeing a 340-pound defensive tackle to anchor a run defense. It's difficult to find something or to point to a single player or position group that says this defense will be a lot better this year. And for that reason, it makes it difficult to envision that they're going to win some of these games where they're going to be a big dog. You seem to agree.
Yeah, and I think it's important to put it into perspective. Before Casey Keeler got there, the Stan Drayton days were dark at Temple, and the defense was complete garbage here. They had no effort. They had no intensity. They couldn't stop the run. Pass coverage was optional. It was so bad. And so I do think Casey Keeler did start to move forward, reinvigorating that Temple tough attitude, and the defense was more formidable. Not great, but more formidable. The problem is they only had 16 sacks and 55 tackles for loss, and the havoc numbers were so poor. They were the bottom 12 or 15 in defensive havoc last season. It was just they struggled to prevent explosive plays. There was just not a lot to draw on, and it's a team. I think they could make a bowl game. I don't want to bet that they will, so I did pass on the win total, but I do think there are wins there for the taking if they can take a step forward.
All right, let's talk about Tulsa here for a second because they're year 0 under Trey Lamb. They went 4-8. They have lots of returning production, 23rd nationally there. Their win total set right at that line for bowl eligibility at 5.5, 22-1 to win the conference. What I like already is that there's a feel to what I'm getting in with on a Saturday basis with Tulsa when I'm betting them. They return their young quarterback, Baylor Hayes, to run this blur offense. They're 3rd in pace. They're going to run a ton of plays. They're going to go. They're one of the most experienced G6 offensive lines and a super experienced secondary. 6 of their top 8 defensive backs return, including 4 players who were sophomores last season. The question really is twofold. Can they find Hayes the right weapons, and can they reload in the box? It looks like they're, just kind of a bit of a spray and pray mentality in terms of what they brought in so many guys at running back and wide receiver. It stands to reason that some of them are going to pop. The receiver room is pretty much new as well. And while they took their lumps, they still upset Oklahoma State. They closed strong with wins over Oregon State and Army. Is that enough for you to believe in them right now to get to 6 wins, Duck?
Absolutely right now. Over 5.5 is something I have in pocket. I think this team is a dark horse contender. One of the 9 that I said at the beginning of the program that could win the conference. I love everything that's going on at Tulsa. They absolutely deserved so much better last year in their first year with Trey Lamb than 4-8. They gave games away against New Mexico State. UAB they could have won, could have beat Temple, could have beat several of these other games. They were in in battles with Navy and Tulane, much better Navy and Tulane teams in the middle of the third quarter. The final got out of hand, but this team was right there. I think Baylor Hayes, after they finally settled on him, they were juggling quarterbacks for some time. Once they settled on Baylor Hayes, he started to get comfortable in the system. I think he can shine here this season. I like the running back ads with Alston and Traquan Jones. I think the receiver group is great with Tempest, Josh Smith, Orion Singleton. I think that this is a room where the tight ends can shine. Grant Mateki and Joellen Roberts are two tight ends that can catch passes and also help in the run game. The offensive line, I'm here to tell you guys, they're going to look good getting off the bus. Cam East, 6'8", 330. Hunter Erb, 6'6", 330. Brody Duffel, 6'5", 310. These guys have size. They've got quickness on the interior. I think the offensive line is going to be very strong. I think they have a decent secondary this year. Should be very good against the pass and preventing explosives. I believe Tulsa will create more pressure on the defensive line. Ty Newhouse, Kyran Duhan, if you don't know who this guy is, he is on the freak list. A 475-pound bench. He power cleans 365. He's explosive on the interior. These guys are going to get after the quarterback this year much more consistently than we saw last season. I think Tulsa could go 5-3 or better just in league play. I think the schedule in the non-conference is one where you get some unique opportunities against some Power 4 opponents. I wouldn't be stunned if they were to upset either one of them. Sam Houston State's a win. East Texas A&M is a win. I think this team can push for 8 wins. If everything else goes right, maybe 9 wins. I think it's a dark horse team to win the league. I love everything that Trey Lamb is doing with this team. I'm absolutely bought in.
Colin, when you look last year at Baylor Hayes, a guy who really got thrown into the fire, there was a 4-game stretch where he was sacked 17 times. It seems like whether it was his internal clock in his head, understanding the system, play calling, protecting him, offensive line coming together, whatever it was, the last 3 games, he was only sacked 3 times. They have that continuity at offensive line. Are you expecting a big jump and for him to drag this team all of a sudden into the top 4 or 5 in the American?
Yes, very much. Not only did the sacks go way down, if you look at his fumbles, he fumbled in his first 6 games, and then I think he fumbled maybe once the rest of the season. Like everything got slower for him, and he just saw everything more correct. I think what also impressed me is not just his, I don't look at TD to INT ratios. I look at big time throws, turnover worthy plays. That was 17-15, which is highly impressive when you have a positive ratio at that young of a stage for him, because usually they come out and they're horrific. It's usually the opposite. And then they don't improve or they finally get to a 1-to-1 ratio. Well, he's already past a 1-to-1 ratio. Like, I'm not going to say he's Bear Bachmeier, but it's like, it's a pretty good season for a kid that's starting college football. And, when you look at this team, Duck mentioned the offensive line and the size. Shout out to the Brook, my favorite restaurant, who has massive portion sizes in Tulsa. Like, this offensive line has been eating very well. And there's so many units on this entire team that are fantastic. I mean, they're supposed to be the top half of the ACC at almost every unit. Trey Lamb is a dude that is not going to be at Tulsa very long. You will see him at a Power 4 level coming up soon. With BBOC, I release the round robin, right? 7 underdogs. I guarantee Tulsa's going to be in there at least 6 weeks of this season.
All right, we're going to have to go a little hurry-up offense to squeeze in the rest of these teams. Well, let's talk Rice, another Owl squad. Scott Abel, 5-8 in year 1, but they have to rebuild the roster again. 120th in returning production. The gun option, the gun choice, whatever you want to call his offensive system, can it find the right quarterback? Perhaps they have in Ja'Curry Brown. He comes in from UCF, has the athleticism to run for 1,000 yards in this offense, certainly has the size to be able to absorb 150, 200 carries at 6'4", 230. Will it be enough for them to get over the win total of 3.5? I think you're just lighting, conference futures on fire at 65-1. May as well be 1,000-1. They got 6 returning players on the line who started at least 1 game, but the run game, that's what the entire offensive identity, team identity, is built out of. 97th in EPA rush, last year, 114th in success rate. Too many negative plays where then they were basically in a situation where they had a pass and they just aren't built for that. Tiny Quinn Jackson returns after 3 100-yard performances last fall. Some decent P4 receivers from Wake and Virginia in the mix to round out the skill positions, but it's really going to come down to Ja'Curry Brown staying healthy and being the athlete that he can be, shown in flashes. Last year's defense, though, under John Kay's tutelage, they created negative plays, but they did not take the ball away. this whole offensive system requires being positive in the turnover margin. Kay was a phenomenal high school coach, really a legend in the state of Texas, but it was his first time calling plays at the college level. He's back. They put in some, talented portal additions in the secondary, at least. Are these guys all going to come together? Probably not. And the other issue that I have here is they're likely going to be dogs in double-digit games here. So can we get to 4 wins? Houston Christian isn't an absolute layup, but they have to get that, obviously, in the opener. Hosting Tulsa at North Texas, home against Western, I don't see it. Maybe they can be against the spread darling. This schedule does not lend itself to them having a feel-good 4 or 5 win season. I don't see that. I think their offense will be more functional. I think it'll be more fun to watch. I think they can bleed some teams and hang around when they're catching bigger numbers. But from a win total perspective, I'm out on these guys. What do you think, Collin?
Oh, yeah. I mean, let me think about it. Scott Abell is going to bring the quarterback shotgun option to a conference that already has Army and Navy and running the triple option, right? So we're going to run the triple here in a different formation in a conference where teams are already preparing for the option the entire year. So that doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. And this Rice defense is going to be absolutely horrific. Is Houston Christian a win? The spread should be anywhere between 21 and 27 points. It just doesn't add up for me. So I am going crazy here with an under 2.5 plus 210 because this team projects as an underdog in 11 games for me. Like, I'm not the only one that thinks that they're going to be an underdog to Western Michigan. Like, Bill Connolly has them like a 5-point underdog by his SP+. So, look, Rice is not highly projected by anybody with a pulse. And you're running an offense that's absolutely going to get stomped by teams that have seen it before. Under 2.5 plus 210. This is absolutely underdogs in 11 games. Where's 3 wins? Name 3 wins on this schedule.
Yeah, Duck, are you with us here? I really wanted to. I like what Abel was able to do at Davidson and basically pull out with a roster that was devoid of even scholarship players. He was able to do some magical things there with the Wildcats. I don't think he's going to pull a rabbit out of his hat here in Houston.
Well, let me say this. It was such a unique install, and it was such a different offense than what Rice had run that Scott Abel really only did get a partial install, and he didn't get the offensive lineman or the quarterback that was equipped to run the system. Now he has that with Ja'Curry Brown. He's got a running back in Quentin Jackson that he can build around. Tyvon Byers is another guy that'll have pop in the running back room. This offense is going to be so much more potent. Rice last year ran the ball on 76% of their plays, and they still allowed 110 tackles for loss against them. There was so much penetration on running plays, and then they were sacked on 10% or 9.8% of dropbacks last year. The offensive line was horrific. I do think they have a few pieces that they can be a little tougher in the offensive trench, and that will allow them to move the football, have some sort of explosivity offensively. I think that this offense will be a decent offense. The defense is atrocious. They were horrific at preventing explosive plays. They gave up 65 20-yard plays, 38 30-yard plays, and 25 40-yard plays last year. Rice was the worst team in the country at preventing explosive. That's not going to change. The betting deliverables they should be, after they get blasted by Notre Dame and Western Michigan comes off an FCS game that they will take seriously. They always do. I think we'll be getting Rice at about plus 8.5 or more. So there'll be betting value on Rice. But I want to play Rice overs because the offense is going to put up more points per game than what we saw last season. This defense could allow 37, 38, 39 points per game. So I want to play Rice overs again. But the offense will be better. So some of these games will be more competitive. Under 3.5 at kind of your average VIG is what I would do here. This team is not going to win a lot of games. They play my 3rd toughest AAC schedule this year.
I've been traveling a lot the last 2 weeks. I was in San Diego, I was in Denver, and I love being in airports where I see people with random college gear, and I'll hit them with a Go Hilltoppers or whatever their school name is, and you just have a nice little quick conversation with a stranger. I saw a guy wearing a Charlotte 49er polo, and I had the same instinct for a second. I was like, I'm not going to talk to this guy. He doesn't want to talk about this football program. No one does. This is a disaster. Like, this program just needs to shut down, for Christ's sake. They're 1-11 last year in year 1 for Tim Albin. Lousy in all 3 facets of football. Their win total is sitting at 2.5. They're 400-1. May as well be 40,000-1 to win this conference. Jumbled mess at quarterback. Connor Harrell coming off major knee surgery. Grayson Loftus or former FCS star Cole Gonzalez are their options there. But the skill positions are relying on a bunch of FCS transfers. They lost their best weapon, Javen Nicholas, to Duke. Good news is they got Jaden Barnes. He arrives from App State. That's a nice get. He could be a really nice go-to receiver. But the defenses have tape. They have scouting departments. They have coaches. They're just going to double them. And the line was so bad, it's hard to really get into even properly grading the passing game or the rushing attack because they're hamstrung by the fact that they were 134th in line yards. I don't see a significant upgrade happening, so I'm still down on the offense. Defense, they went big on the D-line, at least in the portal, and a lot of these guys coming in at over 300 pounds. Maybe they can be a little bit better. They were pretty good at preventing explosives for a team that went 1-11, but the secondary is green, and even a big upgrade on them hitting lower-level transfers means a defense that I still don't think they can crack the top 100 in a best-case scenario. So, Collin, why is this job so goddamn hard?
I don't know what's going on at the University of Ohio in the first place, or Ohio University. I mean, coaches drinking on the jobs, all kinds of shit going on around there. So I don't know why he got out of there. But look, first off, you should have asked the guy in the Charlotte Polo if he's been to Club Lit. That would have been what I asked him. But
I couldn't do it. I just saw he was having an okay day, and he doesn't want to talk about goddamn Club Lit. I couldn't do it to the poor bastard.
Which feels like a millennium, like 1,000 years ago. Look, we can sit here and talk about where the 3 wins for Charlotte here, right? I mean, even the Citadel is going to be a really low spread. I can't find 3 wins on this schedule, but at the same time, it's like one of those things where the information doesn't match, so I can't fire on it. Because Tim Albin, in his second year at Northwest Oklahoma State, added 2 wins from the year before, and year 2 at Ohio went from 3-9 to 10-4. So again, it's one of these things. It's a Casey Keeler situation where I have a history of these bounces, but I got a roster full of guys that I don't trust whatsoever. At least in media days, Albin was like, I own it. It's my fault the product fell off, but I'm optimistic because we've added talent. We are back at full health. You should be back in full health. You haven't played ball in like 7 months. So it's hard for me to go against Tim Albin because of the history of what he's done in year 2.
Duck, can you put a positive spin on this? It's okay to say that the whole roster is a tire fire and just move on if that's what you feel in your heart.
I don't feel that way. It's a shame that they're not going to be able to build the offense around the guy they actually want because Connor Harrell won't be back from the recovered ACL for about halfway through the season. So they're going to split time with Gonzalez, who comes over from Pitt at quarterback, with a Grayson Loftus who's not very good. So that's a shame. And I don't think that the defense was in all that bad a shape. You could see that defense just got hung out to dry so many times last season, but preventing the explosives, at least decent metrics per comparison in the red zone, they made their opponents work for it at times. And now you've got Dean Ace White, who comes over from Florida State. He goes 335 in the middle. The back 7 could be a little bit better. The problem is the offense, which scored 17 or fewer points 8 times last year, and they have to run the ball better. I see 1 win on the schedule, and the deliverable here is I'm okay laying the number against the Citadel, who is not a very productive FCS team. They play in the Southern Conference, which was way down. Everybody likes to talk about Mercer and how great they were and they're going to crush it at Toledo. Mercer feasted on terrible opponents like Wofford, VMI, the Citadel, Chattanooga, Furman. They were all bad in the Southern Conference. Every one of those teams was terrible, and the Citadel is about as bad in the bunch as you get. I think Charlotte will score 24 points and cover this number. It'll be low-scoring affair, but I would lay 10.5, I think you can find out there with Charlotte in the opener, and then they're not going to win another game the rest of the year, and it's really a shame because I like Tim Albin. I think he's a good coach.
All right, let's close this thing out with UAB. 4-8 last season. They fired Trent Dilfer. Alex Mortensen comes in. They played a lot better for him. New roster, though, 125th in returning production. Win total setting at 3.5. 125-1 long shot to win the American. My watch is over. I rallied against Trent Dilfer for years. I watched all of his goddamn pressers, the walk with coach, coffee with coach, all this different stuff. Even found a few spots to bet on him. But he failed in so many ways, and we profited, so I can look back on it fondly. But he's back in high school ball in Tennessee where he belongs. Now, Mort comes in. I think this guy can coach. I think that much is clear. I don't think it was just, a dead cat bounce when he came in. But when a sailor is dying of thirst, he turns to seawater, and it's curtains. And that's what the hiring of Todd Grantham is like, in my opinion. His last 3 defenses that he's called in terms of total yards allowed and points per game. Florida in 2020, 83rd in total defense, gave up 31 points per game. The following year at Florida, before he gets canned, 51st in total defense, 27 points per game. Oklahoma State last year, oh my Lord, 116th in total defense, 33 points per game. They did the best that they could with this budget, which is limited in terms of, the transfer portal. Dizelle Wilkinson from Montana was a 3-star safety. Quay Billingsley from Gardner-Webb was a dog at cornerback. I think those are good FCS gets. Doesn't move the needle, though. And, overall, this defense has never really played together. We've been talking about all these moving parts, and I get it that everyone's kind of in the same boat in the G6, but, this defensive coordinator stinks out loud. They don't have any continuity. They open at Illinois. They travel to Louisiana to field, a defense against Lunch Winfield, who I think is going to eat him up. Then they come home on a short week to face Navy in the Millennial Wing T. Down the stretch at Memphis, at South Florida, UTSA, there's offenses that know what the hell they're doing against a defensive coordinator that does not. So I see wins over Samford and Charlotte, but then it comes down to the question of, is Ryder Burden able to build off of his 3 starts? He threw 7 touchdowns in those 3 starts, which is nice. He also took 11 sacks. He's immobile, pretty much. Nate Rogers, I think, is the only element that could make me feel differently about this offense because he's blazing fast. They can put him in zone read packages. Could we see more of him? Because if we do, and Mort goes with him and Roderick Robinson, who came in from Georgia, who's a thumper, he's 235 pounds. He's someone who's looked great in camp. That's what I'm hearing. The running game could be the answer to either protecting Ryder or changing things up and going with Nate Rogers. That's the only way that I feel differently about this UAB team. Duck, do you see what I'm seeing, or are you a little bit more optimistic when it comes to Mort in his first full season with this program?
I am so much more optimistic, and I'm not being facetious. I think they have 3 ironclad wins, hosting Louisiana Monroe, hosting FCS Samford, and also hosting Charlotte. Matter of fact, they may be double-digit favorites in every one of those games. We saw UAB with a much worse head coach play a much better Navy team, and they were tied at the half. I think there's an opportunity to steal a game against Navy. And if you don't think Navy can go down there and lose, they lost to a horrific Rice team as well. I would only look over 3.5 wins. And I'll be honest with you, I don't love this team. I don't think they're going to be darlings of the conference. I think the defense is still a year away from being any good, but they didn't. The portal haul wasn't bad. And I think when you factor in the totality of the situation with Trent Dilfer, the guy didn't care about the building. He didn't care about the locker room. He didn't value the position. And you have a guy in Mortensen who wanted the job and who got the 95 guys in the locker room to believe in what he was saying. They were 3 touchdown underdogs at Memphis. That game meant something to Memphis, and they won the game. And I just think that coaching matters. The message in the locker room matters. What you say to the people Sunday through Thursday matters before the Friday walkthrough. This guy, Mortensen, is doing it the right way. I do think they win 4 games. Are they going to make a bowl or contend for the conference? Maybe not. But I would only go over 3.5.
I'm just going to put it out there. Bryant Vincent has opportunity to play against UAB, who spurned him for the head coaching job and went belt to ass on UAB when they played 2 years ago. Now, granted, they had Ahmad Hardy, and I could have been the offensive play caller that day. I don't think that that's an absolute just right on the board. It's a W for UAB. We'll see. Collin, you can break the tie here. I don't have an official play, but I'm going to wait and see mode on the Blazers. Duck likes what he sees from a personnel perspective. Where do you come down?
Yeah, well, ULM's coming in off of back-to-back travel off Mississippi State, so we'll see how that goes. And, the 3 wins, ULM, Charlotte, Samford, I agree with that. But hold on a second. I just got a notification. Oh, Todd Grantham's already back on LinkedIn looking for a job. Huh. That's amazing.
Open to work.
Have you guys ever heard the term third and Grantham? That's because his defenses are the worst in defensive third down conversion percentage. The jokes just write themselves with Todd Grantham. Thank you for coming back to college football in your NFL system. Look, there is never going to be a disparaging word about Alex Mortensen, former Razorback quarterback. Even though he was our 3rd or 4th string quarterback while he was in Fayetteville, he was actually doing the quarterback coach's job. Everybody looked up to him, stand-up human being. I am so happy he has a job. And by the way, the team responded to him last year, beating Memphis and Tulsa as an underdog last year. I can name 3 wins on this schedule. I can't mathematically find the 4th. So how do I play UAB this year instead of taking a season-long over and waiting for that 4th to come? You know what? I'd rather bet on them one week when they're 15, 18, 21-point underdogs, and I got a little hair up my ass on Friday night, and I think that they're going to win, and put that bet in at like what? Plus 500, plus 750? That's how I'm playing UAB. Alex Mortensen's going to surprise some people. He already did it last year, but it's going to take a really soft offense that is out of sync, in a funk, to get past this Grantham hurdle for me, who's going to be looking for a new job a year from now.
Yeah, there's nothing more I can say about the defensive play caller. All right, with that, we turn to the end of the episode. We need our title game matchup, and you can also sprinkle in your favorite win totals from the program. Collin, I'll go to you first. Who do you like winning it? Who are they beating?
Yeah, well, I think we're in the same boat here. Memphis and is going to beat. And then if I pick one of the 9 teams that Duck says can win, which he's absolutely right, I would say the most stable. Oh, man. This is hard. I'm really picking a name out of hat, but I'll go Florida Atlantic.
All right, Duck, title game. Lay it on me.
I mean, there's truly 9 teams that can win it. I will say that UTSA and East Carolina will meet in the title game. The venue is important there. I'll say ECU has some breaks go their way. I think Tulsa is a very viable long shot at 40-1. Also, like Tulsa over the win total of 5.5. I played North Texas under a long time ago. I like Memphis under 7.5, and I'm leaning to Rice and Navy under their respective win totals. I may get to the window yet before week 0 kicks off.
And make sure and shop, because Duck mentioned 40-1 on Tulsa. I also got a 32-1 in on the app the other day. There is 2 shops still holding out of that number. Everybody else, and if they paid me, I'd tell you who they were, but everybody else is at 18-1 on Tulsa.
I'm going to go Memphis over UTSA, and I'll go FAU over on their wins, Memphis over on their wins. And Tulane, this McClure injury really concerns me. I'm going to go under. Hasn't moved in terms of the win total in the market. So if you're listening right now, still an opportunity. If that injury is worse than a 2-week sideline, I think this offense is going to be in for a world of hurt this season. Any win totals that you want to highlight, Collin, before we wrap?
Yeah, let's go North Texas over 5.5. Navy, I love Navy under 7.5 plus money. I love Army under 7.5 plus money. Collin Wilson has spoken. Tulsa over 5.5. I think Duck agrees with me. Rice under 2.5, way big plus money at 210 is still out there right now. And then Florida Atlantic, I like them over 6.5 plus 150.
For Duck and Collin Wilson, I'm Mike Calabrese. This has been the Big Bets on Campus podcast, our American preview now in the books. That's 5 G6 previews down, 1 to go. We still got Conference USA, and then Collin and Stuckey are going to do the Lord's work, carry us all the way to week 0 by previewing every single Power 4 team. You're not going to want to miss that. And don't worry, UConn fans, we're going to sneak in some UConn Husky football talk in the Conference USA episode. Be sure to hit us up with a 5-star rating and review. Between Stuck, Duck, myself, we're throwing out futures, and we can't wait to do it when we do the recap show. We're going to take out our favorite reviews and throw you some free money to try to hit on a Heisman, a national title, conference champion, whatever you want it to be. We want to put some action out there for you. Thank you so much for listening. Best of luck with all your bets, and we'll see you at the window.